and gentlemen, welcome to Retro Warriors episode 409. Woo. As always, I'm your host, Justin Baker, and as always, I'm joined by resident old bastard, Chris Saturn.
Hello.
Hi, Saturn. Let's pretend like we weren't just talking about the stupidest shit in the world on the pre-show. That would be really nice, and we can just act like we're professionals.
Look, to be fair, we both have a lot of experience pretending like we weren't just talking about the dumbest shit in the world on the pre-show.
That's true.
We have plenty of experience at that.
When I was a kid, my mom kind of had anger issues. I assume she still does. I just don't live with her. And I remember growing up, I would always be shocked how she would fluctuate so quickly from like literally screaming in your face to completely pleasant.
Yeah, my mom would do that too.
And I think I can do that, but only with acting really stupid.
Shit.
Yeah. I think I have that ability, but only for really dumb things. I do want to mention I've been sick this week.
Yeah.
It's
and
not
are possibly still sick.
I mean, I am. So if I sound extra raspy or whatever, it's all in my throat. It's just like drainage in my throat and coughing and gross. I think it's just a mild upper respiratory. But yeah, so if I sound like I've been smoking 2 packs a day, especially near the end of the next episode when I've been talking for 3 hours solid,
more than that, depending on how much dumb shit we talk in the next pre-show.
Also, I can't laugh very hard without coughing profusely.
Nice.
Thankfully, this show is humorless.
Yeah,
and we
don't worry, I'll be the only one who talks, so that way you never have to laugh.
Awesome. I'll just mute myself, and when you're done, you just shout, and I'll wake up and just stop the recording.
I'll just tell you about the history of memory cards for 2 hours.
I would absolutely listen to that. As far as my week, I picked up Digimon World Next Order.
Okay.
And this is a game that originally came out on PSP. It was ported to Vita and then was ported to Switch and PC.
Okay.
As is the traditional trajectory
these days, yeah.
And it had I'd been waiting on it to come out because it's in the Digimon game community. It's kind of lauded as like, hey, this is the logical extension of the first Digimon World game.
Right.
And I always really liked the first Digimon World game because it was very much about raising these monsters and evolving them. And you spend a lot of time training them and feeding them and cleaning up after them and really actually raising the monster as opposed to Pokemon where you just go, you don't raise them, you just battle them.
Right.
I mean, you raise them in as much as they pop out of an egg fully formed, and they don't have the classic Digimon phase of useless baby, where you just can't do anything with them for a little bit because they're a literal infant. And so Digimon World Next Order is the direct story continuation of the first Digimon World game.
Okay.
And people were like, oh yeah, this one very much is like, it's probably like a 60-40 split. It's like 60% raising the animal and 40% going on adventures. Which is to say, a lot of the, in air quotes, adventures you're going on are you raising the animals, training them, finding materials, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it was supposed to come out in February, and it did, and I forgot about it. I had been hotly anticipating it and then totally forgot that it happened, and I picked it up on sale and have been greatly enjoying it.
Nice.
I'm pretty confident in saying that it is the best Digimon video game that I've played.
Nice.
And at the same time, I don't know if I would recommend it to anyone because I can't tell. It's kind of that Dwarf Fortress situation where it's like, is this actually really amazing? Or am I just so weird and it so specifically clicks into my weirdness?
Explicitly catering towards you?
Yeah. I'm like, is it good or am I weird? I can't tell. Or is both true? I don't know.
Right.
But because there's some issues with it's not the most engaging adventure game and RPG,
Yeah.
And the Digimon you have age and die. So unlike in Pokemon games, eventually they just get old and fucking die. And then you have to go hatch an egg and start over. And how
long does it take them to get old and die?
I'm 13 hours into the game and I'm on my second generation.
Okay, and how old is your player character?
I don't know. They're like a teenager age. They don't really ever explicitly say, but I assume teenaged.
So your character basically stays the same age while these monsters are born, grow, and die.
Right, but this is part of Digimon canon is that humans, age and process time differently than Digimon because humans are not digital creatures. You see, Saturn, you fool, they thought of everything.
Of course they did.
But it's been really fun. I would say this, if you have nostalgia for the original Digimon World game, I know a lot of people do. They played it when it came out, and it's a very beloved PlayStation 1 game. But you have a hard time going back to it because it's very dated now, and it is, then you'd probably love Next Order. It's awesome. If you're looking for like Pokemon, but it's got Digimon in place of Pokemon, totally is not that. Do not go into that wanting that because you're going to be really upset because you can only have 2 Digimon ever at a time. But yeah, I spent a good amount of hours playing that, really enjoying it. I think I'm about like a third of the way through it.
Nice.
And it's really hitting a grind where it's just a lot of like wandering around, trying to figure out who to talk to and what to do and how to progress, and normally stuff I don't like, but I get to raise
Classic
little
JRPG syndrome.
I get to raise little monsters along the way, so I don't care. I'm like, I don't give a shit if the story goes anywhere. I can't wait to continue raising these guys.
Nice.
And you eventually hit like this arc where like when they're really small, they take a lot of care, and most of your time is you caring for them, trying to meet evolution requirements, and then once they hit their like ultimate stage or whatever, it's mostly you just going on adventures with them because they're going longer stretches between getting hungry or needing the bathroom or whatever. So it's good. It's a very relaxing cycle of gameplay that I've been having a really good time with.
Let me tell you the least realistic part of that.
Yes.
Is that as things get older, they don't go longer without going to the bathroom.
Well, there's a bell curve, right?
It's a pretty short bell curve with a long tail end.
Yeah, I could see that. I guess the difference is Digimon die at their most powerful.
Yeah, that's also not a thing we do. Unless, like we die in combat.
Right. I presume that's how everyone plans to die, is combat.
Yeah, I plan on having Christopher Lambert chop my head off someday in fierce sword combat like you do.
That'd be your Make-A-Wish, have Christopher Lambert show up at the hospital and cut my head off.
No, only if I knew I had to die anyway.
Right.
Like,
well, that would, yeah.
This isn't so much a Make-A-Wish so much as a choose your execution.
Okay, right. Well, I assume he's kept pretty busy executing people, regularly.
Right. Of course.
So you'd have to get on the schedule now.
Well, he can't be acting because we've seen him try to do that.
Right. Well, yeah. I think part of Christopher Lambert's whole thing is that they had to make him think he really was the Highlander because otherwise no one would believe the performance.
Right.
So I think it's just a natural evolution of his, stuff he's doing.
He was able to play that one role only for a couple of years.
What have you been playing, Saturn?
I finished up Trails to Azure, which was also a PSP game that was later ported to Vita and then to Switch and PC.
Yes, as is tradition.
Yeah, although it also was ported to PS4 in the middle there.
Mm-hmm.
No, I finished it up. It is good. I was playing through my rushed Nightmare difficulty playthrough, and there is a bonus unlockable boss that you can only play on New Game Plus.
Mm-hmm.
And it was tough on Nightmare, but I managed it. It wasn't like impossible by any means. Then I got to the final boss, which is supposed to be significantly easier than that optional hidden boss, and I just kept getting my ass whipped. Because my characters had about 25,000 HP each. The boss has about 250,000 HP, and it has attacks that do like 30,000 HP damage if you can't take it out fast enough.
Uh-huh.
And I was only doing about 3,000 per hit. And so it was a long ordeal, but I finally managed to get the right combination of strategy and luck to finish it. So I got there.
Yeah.
And it's still good. It's still just an excellent game.
I actually can't remember the last time I played a game on a difficulty entitled Nightmare. Anytime a game is like, oh yeah, this is Nightmare mode, I'm like, no, I'm good. I have regular nightmares. I don't need this.
I only play the Falcom's games on Nightmare and only on New Game Plus when I'm already grossly overleveled to start the game.
Oh, because I didn't realize your levels and everything roll over.
Oh yeah. Oh, okay. All of it. So
yeah.
So I'm walking into the game at what should be finish the game level. So
Right.
for 90% of the game, it's still a cakewalk. It's only that last 10% that there's a challenge.
Yeah.
And by then you have everything you need. But,
Right.
also, after I finished that, I was just looking for something, mindless to play,
Mm-hmm.
and I landed on Her Story, which is something I had considered playing years ago.
Isn't this that one that's like FMV kind of murder
Yeah.
mystery thing?
Yeah, basically.
Okay. Yeah.
I would say it's an FMV game, but I'm not sure there's a game there.
Right. It's mostly watch videos.
Yeah,
and click
it's
on
a
a
database
UI.
crawler essentially.
That sounds like the most boring genre designation I've ever heard in my life. That sounds like a job that someone like applies for and then explains to me what they do, and I'm like, I still don't understand what you do.
Yeah,
You know,
that's
it's a
that's it.
database crawler. No thanks.
And so if you haven't checked it out, basically you are given just what looks like a Windows 95 interface that you're told the open application is a police database, and you can search these video files, and you can search them based on keywords, but it will only ever give you the first 5 results chronologically. And there's about 300-ish videos that are all between 2 seconds and 2 minutes, give or take. And you're trying to figure out what happened, and like by default it has the word murder in the box, so that's something you should search for.
Right. Clearly.
Yeah, and you kind of get some hints, and she says a couple of names in there, and then you start searching for those names, and that gives you some more ideas and just gives you more shit to search for.
Yeah.
And going into it, I was like, this is going to be really boring because there's not much of a game there, and it's just kind of a partial story being given to you. And next thing I know, I had spent like 6 or 7 hours on it and had damn near cleared out the database. So it was clearly an interesting story.
Right. Obviously, you were engaged.
Right. It's just very strange and hard to describe in any way that makes it sound like something somebody wants to engage with. The reason I gave it a shot was because it was from Sam Barlow, who is now an independent game creator. But back then, before he made this, he worked at Climax Studios and was the head in charge of Silent Hill Shattered Memories, which was the one that did the psychological profile on you while you were playing the game. And so I thought that was an interesting concept. I'll see what else he's doing. And it's just more weird shit. It seems to be just more weird shit.
That's good. I've always wished I could have a career that was defined by do weird shit.
That's what the show is. Remember? That's what this is we do weird shit.
It's some,
Especially on the pre-show.
Yeah, I guess. Let's do the news. First up, the Super Mario Brothers movie 2023. Let's be clear here.
There was another Super Mario Brothers.
Oh, I'm aware. Has grossed over $1 billion at the box office. So that's great.
They said that it'll be coming to streaming in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And then it'll be sold on DVD and Blu-ray in like 3 months.
I saw it pretty early to when I think I saw it the day it came out, actually. Because it came out on a weird day, like a Wednesday.
Yeah.
And I gave it a glowing review. I thought it was a great movie. Yeah. And I've gathered that I am in the minority. Because a lot of people are like, no, that was just very boring and safe and not good.
Oh.
And so I don't, have you seen it yet?
No, I haven't. I need to, but I haven't.
I thought it was really good. I saw a lot of complaints about people saying that it was a pretty basic story. And I'm like, well, it's
Super Mario Brothers. What are you going to do with it?
Yeah, like what do you want here?
Right.
But all I have to say, I liked it a lot. I've already watched it at home on the home video, and it's been good. I saw it in the theaters too.
Yeah. Somebody pointed out to me the other day that that the movie Iron Man is the midway point of the 2 Super Mario Brothers movies.
It
is 15 years after the original and 15 years before this one.
That feels wrong.
No, that's it. That's
That
the
feels
midpoint.
No, I'm just gonna say it's wrong and ignore time.
It was 2008. It was right in the middle.
Good God.
Yeah.
A robot controlled by a DualSense controller managed to fertilize human eggs.
Oh, perfect.
Like, on the one hand, this is a ridiculous headline, and that's why everybody ran it.
Exactly.
But on the other hand, if you're controlling a robot to do very delicate tasks, wouldn't you want a pretty comfortable modern controller? Like, one of these already existing controllers is probably going to be better than any shit you could hobble together with off the shelf parts anyway.
It's just like how 15 years or so ago, whenever it was, the military was talking about controlling military equipment with an Xbox 360 controller. It's already developed. Somebody made it. It works. It is functional. It has fine enough control. Why not use that?
There was also that story recently about Ukraine soldiers are like controlling a drone or something with a Steam Deck, and I'm like, that makes perfect sense. It's it's a Linux computer with sensitive built-in controls. Like, not to have fun with the headline. I know everybody ran it just because it was funny to think about. What's next? Sony's gonna be making babies. I don't know. I'm not good at the joke part, but
if I remember right, the actual headline was a DualSense controller fertilized human eggs.
Which
they
is
left off the important part of this.
That's a very different story.
Yeah.
Entirely. So,
I didn't even know it had a wanger.
But yeah, so that was a fun headline floating around. GameCube Space World 2000 prototype was acquired by a collector, features a disc window, power LED, and an ugly-ass controller.
Yeah, people were very big on this when the headline first came out, and they're like, "Oh my god, it's this rare GameCube!" And if you haven't seen it, it looks so nearly identical. Let me send you the picture in case you didn't.
Yeah,
see
no,
it.
I didn't see this.
So it is so close to identical to the retail GameCube, aside from the teeny tiny disc window and the LED light.
Yeah, that controller looks pretty damn close to retail.
But uglier.
Definitely uglier.
It looks like its legs are more spread.
There's no D-pad on it. It's definitely
D-pad.
spread eagle. The B button is one of the bean shapes, like the X and Y. But if I just saw this scrolling real fast on the internet, I wouldn't even notice. Honestly, I would have to stop and be like, "Hey, wait a minute! Why is the fucking start button where the D-pad goes?"
And it's not a start button; it's a menu button.
Oh,
which makes me think: what were they going to do with it? Was there going to be a system menu that you could go back to?
Also, the power button looks weird. It looks metallic.
It does. Also, the open button doesn't have the little divot on it.
Does it? It looks like it might because it looks a little worn.
Yeah, they said that it is worn down, but it does not actually have the little divot like the retail one does.
Okay.
But it does have all the ports on the bottom that it's supposed to have.
I saw some meme on the internet, and it was some guy that was like, hey, wasn't the GameCube largely hated whenever it came out and sold poorly? And then they were dragging him out the back door, like, we don't mention that that was the joke of the meme. Yeah. And I was like, no, that's correct. People fucking hated the goddamn GameCube when it came out.
Yeah, it was so hard to sell those things.
Oh, yeah. Nobody wanted them. The games sold for nothing. The systems were basically free.
Yeah.
I mean,
even after the system dropped to, I want to say it was $70 or something, I was still struggling to sell one versus a PS2 for $150.
When I was working GameStop, this is 2004 to 5-ish, which right before and going into the Wii launch, we were selling refurbed GameCubes for $29.99.
Yeah. And
we had piles of them. You could not sell a GameCube.
I was at EB a few years before that, and we had refurbed Dreamcasts and N64s and PS1s for $15 and refurbed GameCubes for, I want to say, $50 or $60. Mm-hmm. And we couldn't sell any of those things. They just piled up. And now people act like it's fucking gold to see an N64 in the wild. And I was like, I could not sell those things for $15.
Yeah. It has been really interesting to see the kind of cultural turnaround in the gaming space on the GameCube. And especially because here's the thing. I would argue that the GameCube is an awesome system with really great, innovative games. This was an extremely innovative period for Nintendo, and it's why it disenfranchised a lot of longtime fans, because they were innovating across the board with all of their major franchises, radically innovating. The N64 just kind of sucked. But even at the time, people liked the N64 more than the GameCube. Like, across the board, people seem to prefer the thing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I never understood that myself, because even when the GameCube was relevant, it was one of my favorite consoles. I loved the GameCube.
Same,
and I constantly tried to convince people that it was a more worthwhile purchase than at least an Xbox and possibly a PS2, depending on what genres you liked.
Right.
And never got anybody to agree with me, but I also tried to tell everybody it's way better than the N64, and I might as well have been growing an extra head the way that people would react to that. It was just so outside of what anyone else believed at the time, but I still say that holds true.
I'm just gonna go out on a limb and say it. If you're looking for a better system to play feudal Japanese voice-controlled real-time strategy pinball games, you're just not gonna find anything outside the GameCube.
I don't know.
It's got that genre cornered.
Yeah, it's got that locked down.
Double Dragon Gaiden Rise of the Dragons is a terrible name, and it is announced.
Yeah, I think it's a mobile exclusive.
God damn it.
I saw the video and immediately lost it. I've never been a Double Dragon fan, to begin with.
As much as I love brawlers, I don't like Double Dragon either. The closest to really enjoying one, I think, was Neon. I thought Neon was okay.
Yeah.
But I do not like Double Dragon 1 or 2. Double Dragon 3 is honestly offensively designed if you were to have played it in the arcade, because you had to put in extra quarters to buy power-ups, which is just...
This is not mobile. It is on console. It is from a developer who mostly does mobile games.
Oh, no. Double Dragon 4 came out, and I played that too. And it was, I mean, I would rate the Double Dragon franchise as okay-ish. Like, it's just north of acceptable for me.
This looks like if somebody made a Flash game with pixel art. That's what this looks like.
Wonderful. I can't wait.
Yeah.
Nintendo has issued multiple DMCA takedown requests to GitHub for Switch homebrew utilities and emulators because they're fucking hateful anti-consumer assholes.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Fuck you, Nintendo.
And several of the emulators have since said that they are discontinuing development. At least one of them, some of the developers of it are forking it to continue development, which is something. But we are seeing several of the Switch emulator authors kind of shying away from making new emulators for the Switch because of this, which is frustrating.
Like I don't trust any corporation to ever do anything that's in my best interest.
Right.
But it would at least be one thing if any of these corporations came out and was like, "Hey, we're going to lay out our long-term preservation plan for your games in 10 years." This is our promise to you about how you'll be able to still play and access your Switch games, your digital game library. Like, I want this promise from someone. And then maybe, I still won't trust you, but then maybe it'll make a little more sense when you're shutting down other preservation efforts for your stuff.
And the only company that's gotten close to that was Valve. And they didn't put any kind of guarantee on it.
No.
More of a... We think that if something has to happen, that this is how we will respond. But, that's still nebulous at best.
It's like you can't fault people for planning for an inevitability that you have made no indication that you're going to try to stand in the way of.
Exactly, yeah.
So fuck you, Nintendo. Just bite me. CDI game Zelda's Adventure has been ported to Game Boy for some reason.
And it looks like it's based on Link's Awakening. Like they modded Link's
it looks really cute. I want to be critical because it has anything to do with the CDI games, which were god awful.
Yes.
But it looks real cute.
Oh yeah, it's very charming.
I think it's neat, and hopefully gets to come to fruition and isn't shut down by litigious assholes.
Yeah. Well, who's going to shut it down? Philips?
I don't know. Nintendo might. Who? I think Philips would be excited about it.
Oh, wait, Nintendo?
I know.
I'm not
I would be-
familiar with them. Are they competitors to the CDI? I'm not.
They're
I'm
the
not
people
familiar
that
with this
developed
company.
those mini games shaped like toasters that you could play in Animal Crossing. You know, like those
Oh, I
Balloon
gotcha.
Fight and Zelda and stuff. They're those people.
Animal Crossing, is that some kind of CDI game?
Yeah, it was
Oh,
on
okay.
the CD. Computer Space, Wii Sports, The Last of Us, and Barbie Fashion Designer is a weird list of titles that have been inducted to the World Video Game Hall of Fame.
So 3 of those I absolutely understand immediately. Computer Space, basically
Yeah,
the first
it's
game.
like, why is Last of Us there? You've got Barbie Fashion Designer, you've got Wii Sports, you've got Computer Science. You know, what's going on?
Yeah, I don't get Barbie Fashion Designer.
I don't either.
And I was trying to find any explanation for
Discourse
this.
about it, yeah.
And the best I could find is people saying, well, it sold incredibly well for its time, and it helped bring young girls into playing games. And my
Fair.
thought was, that's great, but it still feels like a very, very specifically gendered way to do it.
Well, also, if you're going to celebrate a game that brought in young girls into video gaming, the Barbie Horse Adventures game on PS2,
It was a better game.
that was the better game, and that was the one. People fucking went crazy for Barbie Horse
But
Adventures.
it didn't sell as well because I looked
Is that
up.
it? Okay.
This was the
Well,
best-selling Barbie game.
All right. Well, you know what? I guess I would have never guessed that Barbie Fashion Designer outsold Barbie Horse Adventures. because Barbie Horse Adventures was the shit.
As far as games that brought in girls, you'd think that something like The Sims or Miss Pac-Man would be more relevant.
The Sims specifically, I know a lot of women who don't play video games, but they're like, oh yeah, I was big into The Sims.
Right, yeah.
My wife is one of those people. She loves Animal Crossing. She loves The Sims. She, I don't want to say she hates video games, but she doesn't want to play them like that. That's how I would define it. You know. So yeah, it seems like
but
if that's
I think both of those are already in the Hall of Fame. Is why
Okay.
they weren't. But
I guess
But it
so.
still feels weird that they would get to this before a lot of other games. I'm just confused
Yeah.
by it. Is all I want someone to explain it to me. That's all
I think,
I'm asking.
I think it's if it's sold really well, it makes sense.
Right.
You know, I could see.
There's got to be some reason. I just don't see how it is this year's pick versus some other things that have not yet been honored.
Yeah,
But
and that have maybe achieved that same goal in a
Right.
way that isn't. I don't know.
quite so heavily gendered.
Yes. But still, you know, if that was the best-selling Barbie game, for people that don't remember, there were a shitload of Barbie games, and they all sold pretty well.
Yeah.
It was pretty. I always likened it to the Mary-Kate and Ashley direct-to-video movies.
Right.
That everyone would be like, why are they releasing this crap all the time? It's because it fucking sells gangbusters, man.
Yeah.
The Barbie games sold well. They just do. They're not selling like, you know, Legend of Zelda numbers or whatever, but they sold pretty good.
It's just like those hidden search games that you always see on the jewel case rack at Walmart. People think,
Yeah.
why do they keep making new ones? It's because old people buy like 100 of them, install all of them on the same computer.
And then they got all their hidden search games.
Exactly. And they don't
let's-
remember which ones they've played, so they just pick one at random.
Let's talk about the topic at hand.
Oh.
Which-
We have a topic?
We have a topic this week, and I have like a hiccup or something coming, but I'm trying to power through it. The topic this week is Armored Core 3.
You didn't have to power through it. You could have like paced yourself there.
No!
Okay.
No!
My bad. I'm sorry.
Which is, what if we gave corpos robot suits and no oversight?
Yeah.
Saturn wrote the third entry in the series that could be called the Dark Souls of From Software games. As far as release info, this was developed by From Software. Yes, that From Software. They were the robot game people before they were the hard game people.
Yeah.
This was published in Japan by From Software April 4th, 2002, in North America by Agitech September 5th, 2002, and in PAL territories by not Metroid 3D. I'm having the hardest time talking right now. I don't know what is going
noticed.
on. Metro 3D
It sounds like you're trying to simultaneously talk and breathe helium.
came out May 30th, 2003, and there was a PSP remake that came out in late 2009.
And we don't need to talk about that.
That's what I've been told. Although in the Armored Core community, people are like, yeah, the PSP one's pretty good. That's the general consensus among Armored Core fans, it would seem. Most of them are like, yeah, the PS2 one's still a little bit better, even though the PSP one has some. We'll talk more about it later.
Yeah,
as a fan of huge robots, I had seen Armored Core floating around for years.
Yeah.
But I had always been more invested in the MechWarrior franchise, so I never really gave it much attention.
That's sad.
From Software also did Chrome Hounds, which me and a friend were really into, but for whatever reason, it never resulted in me going back to look at their other giant robot games. I couldn't tell you why. And also, for some reason, I guess because until now, this is my first Armored Core, until now, had never played either, I constantly mix it up with Front Mission for some reason.
It's not that.
Which is a very different game.
Yes.
The only similarity...
they both have giant mechs.
Yeah, the only similarity is they both have giant robots. Like, that's...
Yeah, that's it.
That's it. It would be like mixing up Skyrim and Dragon Quest because they both have sword dudes in them.
And dragons.
And dragons, right.
Yeah.
And quests, I guess.
Sometimes. Now, I had a friend in high school who was super into Armored Core. Like, he got... Like, from the first game, he got super into it. Like, when the PS1 was still a fresh new console, he had played the first one, and then he played Masters of Arena and Project Phantasma and Armored Core 2, and just continued to be a huge fan of the series. And me and him started hanging out around the time that Another Age came out, which was the Armored Core 2 standalone expansion.
Yeah.
And so I would watch him play it every now and then. I'd be like, "That's just big robots fighting," and I didn't particularly get into it.
You're not wrong,
right.
You know.
And then Armored Core 3 came out, and I was working at the game store at the time. I was like, I'll try it. I know he's super huge into it, and he had already told me, like, it's not as good as 2, but it's still good.
Yeah.
And so I picked it up and played it for a while. I was like, oh, this is pretty fun. And then I ended up going back and playing some of the other ones. And so for me, From Software was always the Armored Core people. So and the other games that they made at that point were stuff like Evergrace and what was that other shitty one? Eternal Ring, and Kingsfield, and just. So,
I knew of Kingsfield.
Okay,
Kingsfield. I was on PS1.
Yes,
and I played.
I'm sorry.
Because I got it. It was the cheapest PS1 game that I could find at.
I believe that
at some point in time, it was like 75 cents or something stupid.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I have to buy it for that. I mean, you're not going to not buy a retail video game that's 75 cents. And I took it home and I played it, and I was like, I feel like I got ripped off.
Yeah, you did. And for the record, there are fans of Kingsfield. I don't know why, but there are. I don't know.
What do they like about it? If you're a fan of Kingsfield, please, we want to have you write into the show. Please do. But please get in touch with us.
Eternal Ring and Evergrace were both launched games on the PS2, and they are garbage RPGs. And magazines briefly treated them as if they were worthy of respect. And I don't know why. I think they were just desperate for an RPG on a next gen console at the point.
Yeah.
And they're garbage. So when Dark Souls started getting attention, and I was like, so the Armored Core guys made an RPG. They've done this. It was trash. I'm not going to look at that. I've played their trash games. I don't need a new trash game. And so when Dark Souls started getting attention, I was like, why is everybody so excited about the Armored Core guys' trash RPGs? What is going on in this world?
Yeah.
But,
yeah. Tell me about the development of Armored Core 3, Saturn. Go ahead.
No.
Regale me with the lengthy tale of Armored Core's development.
No. From Software is a very secretive company, and they don't you can find interviews with them. You can absolutely find interviews with people from Software. However, in this specific era, they didn't talk that much. They definitely didn't talk about development. It was tough to find anything at all about the development. I found some interviews with people who didn't work there at the time, who are at From Software now, who talk about how good the game was, and that doesn't help me at all. However, this is the 6th Armored Core game that they made in a period of 6 years.
Yeah, they were. So to be clear, I feel like we're shitting on From Software. They made, other than Dark Souls, a lot of really good and celebrated games.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Even in this era, they did the Lost Kingdom games. They did the Otogi games. They've done. There's been good stuff too.
Yeah,
but they were shitting these games out.
Oh yeah, they were pumping out Armored Core, and you know, the thing is, if you were an Armored Core fan in this era, not only were they pumping them out, but they were pumping them out at a fairly consistent quality.
Yeah.
Where even the like weakest quote unquote Armored Core games at this time were still, for Armored Core fans, better than any other mech game on the market.
And what's weird is it seems like, and I haven't played all the games in the franchise, it seems like the quality started declining in Armored Core when there was more time between releases.
Correct. Yeah.
Which is kind of the inverse relationship with quality that most series have.
Right.
So that was kind of strange. I mean, maybe they were busy. I mean, there were like 6 Kingsfield games. Maybe they were just so busy
pumping out shitty Kingsfield
games, Saturn.
They were distracted by making Otogi.
Otogi is very distracting. So I can see why that would be a problem. Let's talk story. And this is part of the reason I started with Armored Core 3 because it's kind of a reboot.
Yeah, it's a kind of a... So they didn't advertise it at the time as a reboot, but it did destroy all previous continuity. So it is a reboot.
Yeah.
And what's more, the first several missions in the game are basically beat-for-beat recreations of the first several missions in the first game. Mm-hmm. So not only is it a reboot, it's practically a remake in everything but name.
Right. So I'm just going to say this up front. Most of the story in this game is just delivered via text dumps.
True. Sometimes it's narrated at you.
Every now and then, yeah. But even then, it's usually you're sitting at a menu screen and it is talking or presenting text, and that's the story. Every now and then, there's a little bit, an event or something happens in a mission. But that's never
an accident. They didn't mean to do that.
It's never like lengthy exposition or plot or anything like that happening in a mission. So I glazed over for the vast majority of this game's story because it was just like reading a really boring book or having a really bored person read a boring book to me, alternating back and forth. Now, I will say it seemed interesting, but because it was literally just text dumps on a UI menu, and most of it just washed right over me. So tell me what the fuck is happening.
So my friend who is an Armored Core fan, he had told me that makes sense that it would happen that way, because if you were actually a giant mech pilot, while you're on a mission fighting other mechs, people aren't going to be talking in your ear about the important shit. You're going to be focusing on fighting the other mechs.
It makes thematic sense, but
but it doesn't help from a storytelling perspective.
No, I don't. Like, you could also just even if you do it like Metal Gear Acid style, where you have cutscenes that are just kind of still images or something. Give me anything to engage with other than the relatively mediocre writing. It's one of those things.
And it didn't help that the localization is not perfect.
It's not awesome. No. What's weird about it is like it's not a super. It's one of those stories that when you read about the story, you're like, oh, that sounds really cool and interesting. But then when you experience the story firsthand, you're like, oh, this is really boring. And I just want, you just find yourself skipping the lengthy dialogue before each mission because you're like, I want to go play a mission. Can we stop?
Yeah. When you read fan sites about the story, it feels like an
epic narrative.
Yeah. And then when you're experiencing it in the game, it almost feels like you're reading a history textbook.
I would say that because also most of the story you get in the game is delivered in mission briefings. They're like, hey, this is your mission briefing for this mission.
Right.
And as soon as you click on the mission, it's like, escort this thing, destroy that thing. So you already know what you have to do.
Right.
So a lot of it is just very verbose explanations of what you're doing. And then at the end is this little nugget of like, oh, this corporation sabotaged such and such.
Right.
So I would say that reading like a plot exposition, like a plot
synopsis.
summary, or a timeline would be as or even more engaging than actually experiencing the story firsthand, which is kind of weird.
Fortunately, and we haven't gotten to that point yet, but the gameplay makes up for that.
Yes,
because so that is the brunt of the game.
My complaints are getting out now.
Yeah.
And thankfully, you can just mash the button through the story. It doesn't matter.
You can just play it as a fun mechs fight another mechs game.
But for the sake of illustrating that the story sounds interesting, go ahead and explain it to us.
All right. So there was a nuclear war, and humanity was essentially forced to live in an underground refuge named Laird.
Laird past tense?
Yeah.
not layer. They're just
Nope. Layered is the name of the area.
all right.
And it is overseen by an AI called the Controller.
Well, that never goes wrong.
No, AIs are always great. And under the approval of the Controller, 3 corporations have risen to power in place of governments. And the 3 major corporations that you hear about throughout the game are Mirage, Crest, and Kisaragi, with Mirage and Crest being the big ones.
I know Crest. I buy their toothpaste.
Yeah,
it's good to see that they survived. They survived the nuclear apocalypse
and started buying giant robots.
Do they still make white strips in the world of Armored Core?
Yeah, but you can only use them on your giant robots. It's robot whitening.
Yeah, Crest robot whitening strips
with flavor crystals. And so when these corporations want to accomplish their messier tasks, they contract mercenaries that are known as Ravens through a third-party organization called Global Cortex, and that's where most of the game takes place, as you're a Raven that works through Global Cortex to take missions. And after a series of public errors by these corporations, a rebel organization rises up to try to wrest power back from the corporations. The rebel organization is known as Union, and the corporations refer to them as terrorist organizations. Now, I would like to say this is not based on reality, because never in reality have corporations referred to a union as anything other than exemplary people.
Obviously.
Not at all heavy-handed storytelling about reality, for the record.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
But anyway, so your player is a Raven, and you take missions for the various organizations, and ultimately it comes to light that the Controller, the AI, has been trying to sabotage Layered, and that the player must turn against the corporations and kind of team up with Union in order to take down the Controller.
And you see vestiges of this very early on in the story.
Oh, yeah.
And pretty much off the bat, you start to get the feeling of like, all right, eventually I'm going to turn against these corpos, because they're like really heavy-handedly talking shit about Union.
Yeah.
But anyway,
unfortunately, real corpos don't do that.
my point is, I would love to see like an RPG or something in this world. It's such a cool cyberpunk world,
right?
That you never really get to experience firsthand.
It feels like I will say that it does a good job of making you feel like you're just somebody who lives in this world, who occasionally learns what's going on in it that has nothing at all to do with the actual events, despite the fact that you play a pivotal role in many of these events.
I would love to see like an RPG or something based in the Armored Core universe. It's a really cool cyberpunk, us versus corporations kind of story. Yeah. I think it's really interesting. But when you're delivering it to me as just text crawls on what is basically a computer interface, man, it just feels like I'm reading an RSS feed in Windows 95. Now,
that said, since this is your first game in the series, I will say that this game possibly does a better job of telling its story than the prior games. And also, the series continuity has been rebooted so many times that this story likely has nothing at all to do with the upcoming Armored Core 6. So if you're wanting to start the series with 6, which who knows if it's going to be good or not, here's hoping it is, don't expect it to follow this story. Expect it to start its own continuity where corporations are still evil.
Yeah. Let's talk presentation.
Yes.
This is a pretty good-looking PS2 game.
I agree, especially for how relatively early in the system's life it was. It was within the first few years of the system.
Yeah,
anyway.
It's a nice-looking game. So almost the entirety of the game, outside of doing actual missions, you interact with the game through what is basically a computer console.
Right.
It's just a little computer UI, and I think the implication is that this is the actual UI that you would use were you in the world.
Right.
And you never have like an avatar or move around any space. It's just, you left the mission, here's your computer terminal.
Right.
And I really like the menu system in this game for some reason. It's very snappy. It's very fun to navigate. Now, obviously, it's very important that they have a very good UI system, because when you're not shooting missiles out of a giant robot, you're literally in like a Windows 95 menu system.
It's a little better than Windows 95.
All right, Windows 2000 menu system.
So Windows ME.
I like the UI a lot, and I came to really enjoy it to the point that I was enjoying just navigating the little snappy UI as much as I was some of the missions.
So I will say that the UI is so much better than the previous game. Not only is it snappier and better organized, but there were some very obvious flaws in Armored Core 2's menu system. Most notably, that the garage and the shop were completely separate. So when you bought something,
Weird.
you then had to exit entirely out of the shop, go into the garage, and equip that thing. But maybe that thing you just equipped puts you way over limit or way over energy.
And you didn't know.
Then you have to exit out, go back to the shop, buy a different thing to fix that, and then go back out of the shop, back into the garage, equip it. And then you realize that it's actually worse than the parts that you had before, and the whole thing is a mess.
I will say that problem does still kind of exist in 3, because while it's much faster to navigate the UI, there's still not really great ways to compare parts and shop for parts.
But
it is some flipping back and forth, but it's pretty benign. It's pretty fast to do so.
Yeah, it's much faster flipping back and forth than it was before. Before, not only would you have to jump in and out of those menus, but there were these long animations of one menu closing and the next one opening each time that made it feel like it took forever. So half of Armored Core 2 is plotting out on paper what parts you plan on getting when, just so that when the time comes, you can streamline all those animations. And fortunately, Armored Core 3 doesn't have that problem nearly as much, just because the menus are much more efficient, even if they're not perfect yet.
Right. There's still a little... I wish there was more information presented in them.
There's still a little early PS2.
Yeah, but actually navigating them is pretty fast, pretty snappy.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't have any major complaints about that. Let's talk gameplay, because if the UI is the potatoes, the gameplay is the meat here. and
But I also like potatoes.
Well, too bad, Saturn.
Oh no,
it's too bad. This is like it's hard to explain, but it kind of sits for me somewhere between Mech Warrior and Mech Assault.
Yeah,
as far as like complexity.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And I think controls play a big part of this. Because I have kind of weird opinions about controls in controlling giant robots in general.
Yeah, and that's going to be one of the biggest complaints you see about these earlier Armored Core games in general, is because that first game came out well before Sony had a dual analog controller. And rather than adapting the series to that, From Software seemed to want to stay as long as they could without acknowledging that second analog stick.
Yeah. And I will say, a part of me, like, if your giant robot in a video game controls just like any third-person action game, it feels wrong, right? It betrays the weight of the fact that you're in a 10-story robot with, nuclear weapons mounted all over you. So it's almost like it's almost the same kind of way you see people defending like early Resident Evil game controls, where they're like, no, it adds to the tension.
Right.
I feel kind of the same way about any giant robot games. Like, I want some complexity and control because it sort of emulates the idea that I'm piloting this giant complex machine.
Sure.
But I really would have liked twin stick controls in this.
Yeah, that's the biggest complaint, is that it really could use twin stick support. And I believe that the later games eventually add that.
Yeah. That said, controlling it like a tank, which is what you do, feels okay.
Yeah.
The vertical aiming with the triggers feels kind of bad, but the default weapons that you're slotted with have this very wide auto aim arc.
Yep.
It's basically the whole screen.
Yeah.
And so that really alleviates a lot of my control issues.
And you can also eventually get boosters and feet and stuff that changes up not so much how the controls play, but how your mech moves, which can help alleviate a lot of the control issues.
Right. The very first thing I did was buy the biggest, most expensive little booster I could.
Yeah.
So that I could, and heat sink and generator and all that, so I could just jet around the battlefield as much as I wanted. And that did help a lot. So it's kind of hard to differentiate, like, what is a problem with the controls and what is a problem that I can easily solve by customizing my mech in a way that I like, right?
And I think one of my bigger complaints about 3 in specific, if I'm remembering right, is that the best booster and the best laser sword you don't get until basically the end of the story. And so if you want to play with these cool things, you have to save most of your arena missions for once you're done with the campaign.
Yeah.
Which means that you're underpowered for most of the campaign, but it means you get to enjoy the arena more, which is frustrating.
I will say I do have complaints about some of the weapons because if there's a way to tell, I can't figure it out. But in the menus, it's either not there or difficult to tell what kind of auto-aiming arc the different weapons have. So I switched from a gun that had basically the full screen auto-aim to a weapon that shot little rockets that I had to precision aim. It was just like a little dot in the middle of the screen.
Right.
And not knowing I was switching to that, I was like, oh, and then I get into the mission and I'm like, this is impossible to aim with the controls that Armored Core has.
I don't recall it telling you any of that stuff. I remember personally going to a GeoCities website to look at that stuff.
Of course. That said, once you've got your mech and you're customizing it, the game is mission based.
Yes.
And you go do these missions to make money, and then you use the money to customize or upgrade your mech, and then you go back to do these missions.
Assuming you're not in debt.
Yes. And I feel like we haven't said enough good things about the game, so I want to bounce back real quick because I don't want to just complain the whole time.
No, I love this game.
The actual mech gameplay is a lot of fun.
It really is.
I would say if you're familiar with like Metal Wolf Chaos, which is also from Software, it's slightly more complex than that, but not by much. It's about that level of complexity of control and gameplay. And it's real fun. It's just clunky enough that you really do feel like you're piloting this big giant robot. And while navigating the menus and customizing can be a little overwhelming because it's hard to tell what everything does. You know, it's also really fun.
I will also say that this one is a little more forgiving in learning the controls than the PS1 games are, because those, if you didn't spend an hour reading the manual first, you will not know what to do with the controller. And with this, you can kind of figure it out a little more easily on the fly.
Yeah, I had I read no manuals or anything. I just jumped in the game and started playing, and it was totally fine. You come around on it pretty quickly. That said, the missions do provide you money. And
exactly as much as your corporate overlords are willing to pay you.
And that's what it feels like, because any real expansive changes to your mech take a long time to save up the money for.
Unless you have an action replay.
Yeah. There are some parts you can find while doing missions just kind of on the ground. You can get some parts from doing arena missions. But getting like a full custom loadout is it's going to take you a long time. So in most of the early game, you're sort of locked into the default mech with maybe one or two custom parts that you can scrounge up for. And I really wish the game started with like, hey, because you have 3 different chassis in your garage. I wish it was 3 different style of mechs entirely. That would be really nice.
Well, the downside is if you lose one of them, if you had lost your nice one, then you'd be stuck with ones you didn't like.
True.
But because they're basically identical, if you lose one, you're at least not losing much.
What? So I wish there was something for people who are like, hey, I want to come out of the gate with a big defensive mech or a super fast light mech, a way to kind of get you into the archetype you want, maybe a training mission where you use a couple different mechs and see which one you like, and that's when you get to pick. That would be a much better start to the game. Because it feels, it's early on, it's a little rough before you have any money, especially if you're failing missions or doing bad. And some of the missions, it's not super clear what you need to do or interact with all of the time. And so it can be a little daunting to get into the game and start customizing your mech. That said, most of the missions are pretty easy.
These are not the Dark Souls of mech game missions.
No, they're very not. It's mostly just show up and destroy these things. The arena challenges are just one-on-one fights that feel very virtual on. And they start out really easy. So it's a pretty slow curve into the high difficulty. But if you are doing bad, then when you start getting into the difficult stuff, you start going into debt because when when you fail a mission, it's not just like, do you want to retry? It's like, no, you failed that mission. We're moving on, and you're out the money for it.
Yeah. You've got to pay for what you just broke.
Yeah, and it can put you in kind of a pretty difficult grinding loop, especially because, as far as I can tell, you can't like go back and grind earlier, easier missions for more money.
I believe after you finish the game, you can go back and replay certain missions.
Oh, after I finish the whole game. Okay.
And there are some missions I think you can replay before that, but I don't remember definitively. I think you can replay some arena challenges as well.
I believe arenas you can. Yeah. But the regular missions, the story just keeps progressing.
Drops them off.
Yeah. So it can turn into a little bit of a grind.
And if I remember right, there's some missions that if you don't take them and you take a different mission, it'll make a previous mission go away too. So
yeah. Yes.
you
that I
miss
did
out
notice.
on an option entirely.
That I did notice because it was giving me missions I didn't want, so I'd take a different mission, then it would go away. Except for the escort missions. It won't make those go away. It's like, no, you need to do an escort mission.
That said, so escort missions are new in this game. And there's one, as much as I don't like escort missions, there was one thing that I will say about the escort missions in this one. There was a mission, if I remember right, you're supposed to be escorting a train as it delivers a thing. And if the train gets destroyed, you would think you're just fucked, but instead you can just take the cargo and just carry it yourself, and that counts as success. Like, the train could be completely destroyed way the fuck back there, some other mechs are just really ramming on it, and you're just walking away with the cargo, and you just deliver it where it's supposed to go, and you get paid for it. It is considered a success, and that's great. I am a fan of being able to take alternate paths to victory.
But this is not consistent across all escort missions.
No, it is
For
not.
example, one of the earlier ones, there's a truck hauling a bomb that for some reason is fully functional on the truck.
Right. Yeah,
instead of
That's how you
having
move bombs.
the key detonating element removed.
So you can remove that?
You should if you're going to drive it down the highway uncovered in a truck. And it's driving down this highway and there's debris everywhere.
Right, yeah.
And the truck is just slamming into anything in front of it. And if it even so much as bumps your mech, the bomb detonates and you lose.
Yeah. That's.
And so
Them's the breaks.
It's, the escort missions are they're a little all over the place. I don't love escort missions in general.
Yeah.
The missions where you're just showing up killing dudes.
Yeah, those are fun.
It's pretty fun. The actual mech combat, and I think the game recognizes that, hey, mech on mech combat is really what you're here for. So here's the arena. And I kind of got the feeling that the arena was as much the draw to the game as was the missions, if not more.
Yeah, and they acknowledge that in the PS1 era, because that was what Masters of Arena was. It was basically just a mostly arena expansion. And when that was so popular, they've just continued emphasizing the arena in the newer games.
It seems like the way they expect you to play the game is mostly doing the arena and customizing your mech for the arena. And then, there's these missions with some story if you want to go do that, we guess.
Right.
And I would say if you're just playing it for the arena, I don't know if you could just totally ignore the missions and do only arena and like get enough money to actually do anything.
I think you'd miss out on some stuff at the very least.
Possibly.
I know you'd definitely miss out on some components that are exclusive to story missions.
Yeah. So I guess they do really expect you to do both, but the arena feels like a pretty. It's not a side thing that you do. It is a thing you're kind of expected to go back and forth.
Yeah.
Between the arena and the missions, and the arena is a big part of the game.
Mm-hmm.
You can have hired dudes that you hire to come in and help you, and they range in how useful they are.
Yeah,
they're okay. They're not amazing.
One of the things that they added to Armored Core 3 from the previous games that I really appreciate is the ability to just drop parts on the fly.
Yeah.
You just, if you're like running over limit, if you're going slow, if you're damaged, or if you see another thing you want to pick up, you can just drop off one component and grab the next one just as you're going. And that's nice.
Yeah.
That's neat.
Let's talk reception.
Mm-hmm.
Because this was, in according to you and according to the research I did, kind of fans of Armored Core are like, play 2 or 3. These are the ones we recommend.
Yeah.
And it seems like this is one of the more well-received and enjoyed Armored Core games.
Yeah, it's generally well-received by the fans of Armored Core. But Armored Core games generally were not super well received by the general press or games reviewers. So you would often see these Armored Core games, like especially with 2 and 3 that are the fan favorites. Fans would act like they're fantastic games, but then when you look at general reviews, it's like 6, 7 out of 10, somewhere around there. However, I did notice that Famitsu gave it a 34 out of 40, which is really high for Famitsu.
That is real high.
So
I suspect that we kind of skipped over it. I suspect that a lot of enjoyment in this game comes from the multiplayer.
Yeah, the multiplayer is really good,
which I did not get to experience.
And what's more, all the Armored Core games up till this point, and I believe a few games after this, all supported System Link. Mm-hmm. And if you didn't have a PS1 during that era, there was a goofy port on the back of the PS1 that no one ever used that they didn't know what the fuck it was for. Mm-hmm. It's the System Link port, and you can get this serial cable that goes between the two systems, and the serial connection looks kind of like the multi-out on the later model PS1s and on the PS2, and it just connects two systems together and lets you play multiplayer Armored Core and basically nothing else.
Yeah.
Because nothing else really supports PS1 System Link.
Right.
But all the Armored Cores did, and then Armored Core 2 supported System Link via FireWire, which if you don't know what FireWire is, don't worry, nobody else did either.
Yeah.
It was a cable that was used for MacBooks, camcorders, and PlayStation 2 when you were playing Armored Core and nothing else.
Correct.
But yeah, it is nice. You could do 4 systems linked on 4 TVs in the off chance you encountered 3 other human beings that wanted to play Armored Core.
Right, obviously.
Not that happened ever to anyone, but it was a possibility.
Yeah, it seems like it would be a really great game to get to sit down and play multiplayer with friends.
Oh, yeah. Even just split screen is fun.
Yeah, and I suspect that getting to do that would have added a lot to my enjoyment of the game.
Oh, yeah.
Not to say I did enjoy the game. I very much enjoyed the game.
Yeah.
But I kind of agree with a lot of the reviews where if you're just playing it single player, it's just pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty fun game.
Yeah. But yeah, we mentioned the pretty much all the things that the reviews were critical of, which was the shallow story, that it wasn't a huge improvement from prior games, and the lack of dual analog controls.
Yeah. So reception. The PSP release reviewed poorly.
Yeah.
But according to fans, is pretty complete version of the game.
Yeah, I've not tried any of the PSP ones, so I can't speak to that.
Yeah. And as far as legacy, obviously you know From Software because they still make video games.
They do. I suppose you could call them video games. I call them torture simulators.
Yeah. Yeah. And which is weird coming from someone that plays horror games that very often are actual torture simulators.
Yeah, those are pretty great.
But they've announced a new Armored Core. They're continuing the franchise because the previous Armored Core was 2013.
Yeah, that's true. Did you watch the video that compared Jeff Keighley's reaction to that?
Oh my
versus...
God. It was
announced at the Game Awards, and Jeff Keighley, before he announced the trailer for Armored Core 6, gave it like this intro with the reverence that you would reserve for like the absolute pinnacle of respect
for various deities, high art, royalty, you know, that kind of stuff.
And somebody collected that video and mashed it up with a review he gave to Armored Core 4 back in 2006, where he basically just shits on the game.
Yeah, and he was like, he said, "This is the worst game I've played all year." He shit all over From Software. He shit all over the Armored Core franchise, and then it keeps cutting back to him being like, "From Software, makers of the legendary Armored Core video games." And then it cuts back to him being like, "I hated it. I can't believe you're giving it a 7. It deserves a 2."
Yeah, didn't he give it like a 4 or something?
He gave it something real low. Yeah. I think what he said was, "I could never see why you would give this game more than a 5. I think is what he said.
My friends who were super huge into Armored Core, they also did not care for 4 very much. So maybe there is something to be said for that, but it's still a hilarious juxtaposition.
As far as final thoughts, if you really like or are attracted to the idea of playing a super fun, semi-arcadey mech combat game
With granular customization.
that's not too involved and it's not going to eat your entire afternoon, then play Mech Assault. But if you've already played Mech Assault, go play Metal Wolf Chaos XD. But if you've already played Metal Wolf Chaos XD and you want a little more customization, but you don't want to go play Custom Robo, then maybe you would enjoy playing Armored Core 3.
And if you enjoy Armored Core 3, there's like 40 other Armored Core games.
Yeah, some of them are other versions of Armored Core 3.
True. There's, I believe, 2 other Armored Core 3s.
So if Armored Core 3 is the one you really love, you can play the trilogy of Armored
play
Core
Silent
3s. It's hard because I think we are, kind of spoiled for good mech games. And not only that, good mech games from Software.
Yeah.
Because they have other franchises. They had
Murakumo on the Xbox.
They had Murakumo. They did Metal Wolf Chaos. Yeah. They did they did one of the Gundam games on like PS3, I think. It was I don't know. It was one of them. They did Chrome Hounds, which was a very celebrated mech game. It was if I remember right, it was like online almost entirely. But it was like people fought these missions and they showed this big map of the world, and as whatever faction you joined, you would fight missions and your faction would get bigger on the map. So it was kind of like this big worldwide scoreboard. It was pretty cool. But so it's difficult because there are so many cool mech games out there. There's the Lost Planet series. There's the Titanfall series. There's the new Mech Warrior 5. There's just a lot out there.
But when Armored Core arrived, it was in an era where there was not so many.
There was not as much
games. There was Mech Warrior and there was Armored Core, and that was basically it.
And so it's hard. I had a really good time with the game. I enjoyed it a lot, but if I was sitting down staring at that or Mech Assault, I think I would pick Mech Assault over it, which isn't to say Armored Core 3 is bad. I think it's very fun. I think it would be a really fun game to cheat in. Start the game with $1 billion and build whatever mech you want. Like if you're playing with cheats and save states, this is a blast.
Yeah, I had an action replay. It made the game way easier.
If you're playing it straight up as presented on PS2, I think it worsens the experience. I think this is one of those games that emulation really does vastly improve. I think it bumps it up from like a pretty fun C+ to like an A-.
But Justin, that goes against From Software's vision.
Oh, right. Their creative vision of me not improving their game for them.
Yeah, their creative vision is for you to really suffer through games. Remember?
They're probably also upset that I added an easy mode to Sekiro and turned off all of the negative effects from dying in Elden Ring. They're probably upset that I did that too.
You know, I was looking at Armored Core 6 and I almost pre-ordered it for Xbox, and then I was like, or I could just play it on PC and cheat a lot.
There you go. Right? Yeah. That's so I think we're definitely spoiled for giant robot games these days. True. But
how many of those giant robot games let you sit there and have corporations yell at you the whole time?
This is true. It is a draw. So if you don't get enough of that in your regular everyday life, here you go. So I think I would recommend playing this game and cheating at it, because that will make it infinitely more fun.
Yeah.
But if you
really, I recommend cheating at most games.
This is true. A blanket recommendation for cheating.
Yes.
From Retro Warriors as a franchise. Just please cheat.
In video games, not like at your personal life. Do not cheat in your personal life unless you have gotten approval from all relevant parties.
Personally, I think you can do either. I don't really care. It's your own prerogative. Do your own thing. But so I think we agree specifically in video games.
Do not cheat on your taxes. That can get you in trouble. We do not endorse that.
I'm not going to tell you how to live. It's just kind of where I am.
Okay, well, when you tell your lawyers that we told you to do it, remember that only Justin said it was okay.
No, I didn't tell anyone to do it. I just said that, you're your own person. I'm not in charge of you, right?
This is not legal advice.
But if I was in charge of you, I would tell you to go to patreon.com/retrowarriors, where you can give us your hard-earned money that you earned by cheating on your taxes.
You definitely did not earn by cheating on your taxes.
To listen to Talking Wizards, or our pre-show, or our show where we read magazines called Read Along.
I don't remember what we talked about in the pre-show this episode, but it was nonsense.
We talked about what if a meteor was going to hit the Earth and how the show would go down if that was what we were dealing with.
Right. That's right. That was a good
Never
one.
once did we consider that we wouldn't do podcasts if a meteor was about to. We were just like, well, I mean, obviously we'll still do the podcast. I mean, you know, that's fucking ridiculous.
What else would we do?
What else would we do?
Spend time with family? Gross.
So yeah, also rate and review the show, please, on something. I don't know. Go on TikTok and be like, Retro Warriors is awesome. Like I don't know if that's how you talk or not, but wherever you want to.
That's how TikTok works, right?
Wherever you want to be, that's fine. Just tell people about the show. And we want to thank the following patrons.
Draw pictures of how much you like Retro Warriors and put it in the Splatoon lobby.
Yeah, there you go. Please do that. Go on the Miiverse and just write the Retro Warriors logo. Is that a thing? Can you do that?
I don't think
still?
Miiverse exists anymore now.
Jeez. Guess they got to use Twitter then.
That's why you got to use Splatoon lobby.
We want to thank the following patrons for their kind donations, starting with Dilf Toast Esquire,
And Nicholas Perfect.
Christopher Britt,
Luke Saracen Clark.
Slick Rick,
Dean Schmidt.
Captain Koloth,
The Coffee Samurai.
Lee Sparkles Ace,
And a winner is me.
are all the kind patrons we want to thank for giving us all their hard-earned money that they work so hard to obtain and give to us. Also, I want to mention, I don't mention it ever, but if you want to give us a couple bucks because you like the show or because you particularly like a specific episode and you want to kick back and kind of help us out, then we have a Ko-Fi, I never know how to pronounce it, K-O-F-I, that you can donate to. We have a link in the show description, and you can just go kick us a couple bucks just to be like, hey, I like your show, but I don't really want to do the monthly subscription thing because that's a lot of commitment. You know, that's just, it's so much commitment. You get
commitment.
You get lots of cool things for it, but if you're commitment averse, then you can just send us $1 or something. That would be fantastic of you to do for us, I guess. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. We'll be back next week. And as always, let us cling together.